listening versus talking to or at people. And I think just having conversations with people like yourself, people like Tony Arnrich, people like Tanner Swanson, and just all the people that are in the catching community, to be able to just to say, okay, maybe it's time for me just to shut up and learn and listen and see what these guys are experiencing themselves.
Welcome to episode 13 of the Backpick Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Thomas. Today's guest is Tyler Goodro. You probably most know him from his social media accounts at Goodro Catching. He posts a ton of great content. He also runs the Field General Catching Academy, and he just spent the last season as the catching coach for the Lincoln Salt Dogs. He talks a lot about the differences between youth and professional athletes, the different tools and routines that he's using. We dove into a ton of aspects of catching, but we specifically got into a great discussion on blocking, which I think will be really fun for all of you. Hope you guys enjoy it. All right, so you have obviously been working with catchers for a long time. I'm intrigued. This was your first year in professional baseball, working with the Lincoln Salt Dogs, getting a chance to take it to the next level. Talk a little bit first just about that experience, being, relatively new. Obviously, you played professional baseball, but being new to the coaching side of it.
Yeah, I think, essentially when you get into just coaching in general, you always have that mindset of, man, I could always do this better than this guy. And then you have to start swallowing your pride just a little bit. And I think with this experience, since I have been so far removed from playing and have been coaching for, I was coaching while I was playing, right? Because a minor league player doesn't make that much money. But just experiencing that in general, I think number one, for me personally, it was really, just awesome in itself to be able to put a uniform back on. And then it was more or less just investigating, doing the research, listening versus talking to or at people. And I think just having conversations with people like yourself, people like Tony Arnrich, people like Tanner Swanson, and just all the people that are in the catching community, to be able to just to say, okay, maybe it's time for me just to shut up and learn and listen and see what these guys are experiencing themselves. It was kind of a unreal and surreal experience. Obviously, it was independent baseball; it wasn't the major leagues, but it was just a great learning experience just to see the game from a different perspective. And asking questions to guys, learning about guys, what makes them tick, what are they thinking about in certain situations. Why did they throw to this bag versus this bag? Why did they call this pitch versus that pitch? And I think it's just it's a huge think tank inside the dugout. We don't have a lot of the data, the tech. We have Rapsodo. We get reports 2-3 weeks later. So you're trying to have to do stuff on the fly, so to speak. But experiencing that, it was unreal. I'm very thankful and grateful for the organization for allowing me to kind of crash their party a little bit. This was like a last second thing for me. One of our old GMs at one of the old teams that I had played for in this league, he was now the new GM of the club. But so I gave him a call and I said, hey, would this be an opportunity for me? I don't want to impart by anybody's or step on anybody's toes. He said, yeah, here's the manager's number. Great conversation. And then it was just, honestly, it was like riding a bike. I mean, getting back into the swing of things. I missed the camaraderie of being in a clubhouse. That was also nice to be back amongst those guys. But yeah, I think I learned more from them than they probably did of me. But again, they were probably tired of my questions. I try to be a little inquisitive when I'm in those types of arenas.
So talk about that first step. You're there and you're in charge of the catchers. It's like when you and I have both worked with youth athletes for so long, it's like you're really kind of directing them on kind of, let's get a baseline of knowledge. These guys have a baseline of knowledge. What's your first step in terms of you just get there and you're working with these guys? What's the first thing you're doing?
Yeah, the first thing I'm doing is, of course, I'm doing my own internal assessment. Like, okay, what is it that, I'm not telling them, hey, like, essentially I'm just watching, and I it's just fascinating to sit there and watch, and then I'm backing into it with a lot of whys. Like, why do you do this? Why are you calling this? What are you doing? How do you prepare for a game? I think that's one of the biggest things that even when you get to that highest level, just because you don't practice, you don't have maybe an extended spring training, you don't have 10 coaches, you have 3 guys, you have 4 guys, in terms of how many catchers you might have on a roster. But again, it's just kind of like, what are we trying to accomplish? So I challenged a lot of our guys. We had a guy that had been in affiliated ball who had caught at the AAA level, and we had a guy that had no prior professional experience whatsoever. So it was much easier to work with that guy that had no prior experience than it was with the guy that did have some experience, because you kind of let those guys do their business. You look at what their strengths are. As far as I could sit here and say right now, if I gave my initial scouting report on the guy, our frontline catcher was a bat first catcher. Our backup was more of the defensive. And I feel like in some cases at the big league level, you see a lot of that. More frontline catchers are probably more bat first guys, maybe not as great defensively, but still get the job done. The pitchers love them. And I just challenged our younger guys, said, hey, catch as many bullpens, if not all the bullpens you can. Take notes on your pitchers. Get a notebook out. What are their do's? What are their likes? How do they prepare for a game? Do they need water? How do they take their coffee? I mean, getting to the simplest detail possible, I think, was going to help those guys. As far as I'm concerned, or what I tried to do, again, it was just, hey, let's find a routine. Let's get your defensive work in. Let's find a routine that's going to prepare you for your game mentally. Let's look at scouting reports. Let's look at video. I think that's one thing that we have more accessible now, especially from when I played it. Let's look at videos. Let's look at our pitchers. Let's watch you catch. Let's take video of how you catch. So, yeah, that's kind of how we backed into it, and it was always ever changing. I mean, I wouldn't say there was something as consistent other than, okay, hey, you threw bad last week. Let's work on some footwork and some throws to second base. Hey, you didn't really catch this pitch very good, or your transition into your stance was not great. Like, we gotta start to assess and reevaluate how we're approaching those simple points.
So I'm always intrigued because, in-season work is always something that I think, like, and I always tell myself I got to do a better job of helping, the younger guys figure this out. But what on a day-to-day, you're obviously playing a bunch of games. What on a day-to-day is like the routine that you have with these guys to get them ready each day?
Yeah. So, number one, obviously, I think we all probably know this. The number one skill, or the largest volume of skill that you do in a game, is receiving. So we have a plyo ball routine that we do. It was something that I picked up from the San Diego Padres catching coordinator Brian Watley. So we'll take some plyo balls, and we'll do like what we call a pump fake drill, and it's more or less just to test their timing, to see how they're moving the ball, and then the control of that. So that's number one for us, is we always have a plyo ball routine, or we had a plyo ball routine is what we did. We had accessibility to a machine. So those guys, and again, I laid it out for them. I'm sure you've heard a lot of different catching coaches or coordinators or people like that. We want to have a buffet. And so, again, it goes back to like, what are we failing at? What are our pain points currently? What are our strengths, though, too? And I think that's one thing. We always attack our faults, or those things that are continuously creeping up in the game. But why are we not building on our strengths? And I think if we can build our strengths, continue to build our strengths, what makes us good. So we tried to instill a lot of those strength components versus always, spending 100% on, hey, what are our really, pain points, or what are we not really good at the moment? But yeah, so we focus a lot on the receiving stuff. I tried to, with this, at this level, I think just because we would get our reports, or we would get our Rapsodo reports, at such a post-dated time that we focused a lot on pitch calling. We were not very good, and I can sit here and say this, we were not very good at home in the first inning. And maybe that was just the adjustment from the bullpen mound to the mound out there. It was not, we didn't have a good understanding of what the umpire strike zone was. So I think it was things like that. It was really understanding, okay, like, how are we going to attack this? It's having that pitcher catcher talk and having those meetings, and just rolling through like the lineup, what guy does what and what guy does what really well, and then sticking to our plan, or at least deviating from our plan, but to get us back onto the right track, which our mission was to get a W.
So you guys weren't good in the first inning from a catching perspective, or like a whole like the altogether giving up
Pitching,
runs?
yeah, I feel like sometimes getting on the same page. It got better as the season went along, but that first inning, it always seemed like catcher pitcher were on the same page. A lot of ass, a lot of hey, and sometimes I think catchers in some cases have egos. We think this is the right pitch that should be thrown, and I think Jerry Weinstein has said it several times. The right pitch thrown with doubt is far less superior than the wrong pitch thrown with conviction. And I feel like there was just a lot of butting heads back and forth with what the right call was. And some hitters come in with the confidence that we're going to ambush something that you can't do much about. You're trying to get strike one, and then you're trying to eventually put them away in as far less pitches as possible. So I think that was just kind of what it was at, is getting on the same page early. What is our plan? Why are we deviating away from our plan, and how can we get back on track with it?
I think that's a good lesson in the sense of, we look at like the youth, category of high school baseball and even college baseball. We don't have as much of the analytics to be able to say, hey, we're not doing this and we're not doing this and that, but like just looking at the box score and saying, hey, there's more numbers on the front end of this thing than the back end. What are we doing there? And I think too many times we think of analytics as this massive computer generated deal, but it's like analytics are just statistics. And I think too many times guys aren't diving into just looking at box scores and looking at the games. And there's plenty of, analytics, plenty of information there too, that I think guys can take from. So that's awesome that even a professional organization is just saying, hey, we're not very good at this stage of the game. What can we do differently?
Absolutely. No. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, analytics is good. Why aren't we looking at just we're trying to find the gray in everything, as opposed to looking at the black and white? I think analytics serves as information. It's evidence of what do we do good, what do we do bad, right? It's not going to tell us how to get better. It's not going to tell us why we're really sucky. Yes, it does. I think that takes trusting our own eyes. Number one. Number two, it goes back to being inquisitive. I think from the coaching side, that's something that I've tried to be really, really good at. Sensitive, but also affirmative in terms of like, why am I asking this question? Is this the right time to ask this question? And does it make sense to bring it up either at this period of time, or when is the right time to bring it up? When do we work on this stuff? Especially like, you don't have practice, right? We don't have a 4-hour practice before we go play a potential 3 to 4 hour game. So I think it's just, how do we present ourselves? How do we convey our message to that based upon the information that we do have? What's the evidence telling us, right? You either, this guy did it because he's got the hammer in his hand, or this guy did not because he's, whatever. But I think it's just, I think some people just don't take in consideration the game is not played amongst a bunch of Pongs or robots. And I think there's still a lot of natural ability that goes into it. There's a lot of flow that goes into it. And again, I think the difference that I've felt in independent baseball, watching Major League Baseball, hearing people talk, or knowing in our close group of friends that we know, it's like yeah, this baseball is kind of that old school baseball. We wish we had a little bit more. And then I think it comes down to the player. What do they want to know? Do the players care as much as we think we want them to care? So
No,
that's just my
absolutely.
opinion on stuff like that. I mean, I'm a big analytical guy, but again, you got to pick and choose what exactly it is that is the right time and the right information, and how do you convey that information? Are you speaking the right language?
Totally. So, talk a little bit about the difference, just, having the experience now of working with youth guys to working with professional guys. Obviously, I know you get college guys that are coming in
Mhm.
there. Talk about the difference of what you're doing from a catching perspective with basically like all three of those groups.
Yeah. So I think I look at it in terms of, you know, timing and repetition and strength and health and performance. All that stuff goes into factor. Like I look at a kid. So if I train in a 12-year-old kid versus a 22-year-old kid, the 22-year-old kid might have a solid foundation in what they do, what they know. Obviously, they're going to have biases about who they are as a person, uh, and maybe sometimes the truth hurts. So when I look at a young 12-year-old catcher, let's say he just walks into our facility for the first time, I'm gonna let him fail. I'm gonna watch him. I'm gonna let him fail. I'm gonna let him do some stuff. I'm gonna let him go through a decent amount of volume in order before we start making changes right away, because that kid's super raw. Nobody would change Hunter Pence's swing, I don't think. The guy he was a freak. And I remember a quote, and I can't remember who it was. It was years ago, somebody said it on ESPN. It was like, let the freaks freak. And I think that's the way we got to look at it. We all have our own understanding of the position. We have our pillars per se, right? In terms of that. And I remember listening to Bobby Wilson on your podcast, and he talked about how the Rangers have pillars. And I think if we don't have pillars and we're just saying, oh, yeah, I love what Bobby said, and I love what Brett says, and I love what Tanner says, and I love what Ryan Cienko says, and Watley, and all these guys say, what does that put us? That just puts us kind of like, hey, I'm a yes man. Well, I think I have some beliefs about X, Y, and Z. I'm more at the younger age about the quantity over the quality. And I say that in respect, right? When we get to a certain stage, yeah, I want them catching significant amount. I want them in their stances, whether that's traditional, and I'll put them, a significant amount of time in a traditional setup. I want them to fail out of it. I want them to get tired, and then let's back ourselves into it. Why did you fail at this? Well, here's some reasonings as to why, and let's develop a plan from it. But I'm really big on quantity. So when we run our facility here with a 12-year-old kid, we're trying to get as many reps in as possible, whether that's receiving, blocking. We're very heavy blocking because kids just don't, for some reason, like the ball hitting their body. As far as a 22-year-old guy is concerned, it's again, it goes back to, are we going to be high rigor this day? Is this guy not played in 3 days? If he's not going to play in 3 days, or if I have good understanding from our manager, if he's not going to be in the lineup for the next 2 days because we're playing righty lefty matchup, or the splits are better with this guy versus this guy. Is it a request from the pitcher that he wants this guy catching him? Then we have a little bit more room to do some work. And if there's a guy that hey, I need to work, I need to throw a couple times today. Great, let's get out on the field. Let's get your arm in shape a little bit. Let's throw to the bases 10 times max, maybe. So I think that's where it's different. Off-season stuff with guys, it might be, this guy really struggled. And I think that goes back into what information do we have? Those guys at the professional level, they have True Media, TrackMan data to tell them, Hawkeye data to tell them, hey, you really struggled on this specific quadrant, number one. You struggled on this specific pitch, number two. So how do we combat that? How do we get better at that? Is it your setup? Is it your angle? Is it your head positioning? Is it your path to the ball? All the stuff that goes into being a successful receiver. Now, how do we become more consistent from that? So it's probably maybe not what most people would hear. Like, man, you're going to focus all on the quantity versus the quality with a younger kid. Absolutely. Because the kids are weaker, I should say, weaker. Um, and they need the reps. They need the reps. It's kind of like this. And I started to think about this probably about 2 or 3 years ago, when I would have kids come into the facility. They're like, my arm hurts. I'm like, your arm hurts? It's middle of December. How's your arm hurt? You've been off for five months or whatever, why does your arm hurt? Well, when was the last time you threw? Well, it was with you. That was 2 weeks ago or whatever. I'm just, throwing some generalities out there. But okay, so then we need to throw more. Why are we dropping so many balls? It could be a lot of mechanical stuff, technique, but maybe we're not catching enough. Why are we not blocking balls? Why are we still afraid of blocking balls? Well, we're not blocking enough. So I think it comes into a lot of different phases. It's, again, my personal opinion, just how we try to run our stuff. And I think it's worked. It's worked for a lot of people. I'll get some positive affirmations from people, throughout the springtime, summertime. Hey, so-and-so blocked, 5 balls today. Thanks so much. Stuff like that. So that the training is probably working. That's the only thing that's different between the youth ball and then the professional ball, is that when you hop out onto the field with a professional player, you can see your work in progress, number one, or you can see if because you're right there with them. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that because, I always tell guys, I'm like, hey, I'm going to do as best I can for you when you're here, but you're only here once a week. And the best catchers are going to be the ones that between lessons, between classes, that you're doing stuff and you're taking what we're doing and you're putting it to work, so that when you come back, it's easier for us to continue to add on and move and change the pitch and make it more difficult, because there is a lot of those, like, I call them church clients, where it's like they think that like they go to church every Sunday morning, like God's, he's looking over me, but it's like, yeah, but are you practicing religion, or you just go to church every Sunday? You know what I mean? So it's like,
absolutely.
It's just the idea of like, you got to put some time in. We'll give you some guidelines on how to do it. But I want to go back to one quick point you made there was on the blocking piece. I think it's super important because there's so many, youth coaches that'll talk to me and say, yeah, like Billy doesn't block well. But it's just that there is nothing in the world that is natural about just wanting to sit there and get hit by something. And I think that's such a huge obstacle in the youth game. What's your kind of first step in terms of just getting them comfortable allowing the ball to hit them?
Yeah. I think I saw somebody say this before. I don't know if it was on your podcast or I saw it somewhere else, but I think it was one day I was doing some catcher training, and at one point in time, and this answer might be a little long-winded, so just kind of bear with me here, but when I first started doing catcher training, it was once a week, 4 times a month, and I would just have 6 guys in each group. And I'm like, this is not advantageous to their preparation to get better. And again, it goes back to those repetitions. And so but going back to that, at one point in time, I was like, all right, class 1, we're going to receive, class 2, we're going to block, class 3, we're going to throw. And then the final class of the month, you're going to do some specialty type plays where you're going to do bunt recoveries and tag plays at the plate. And so we were doing a tag play, and I said, hey, just FYI, if that ball takes a high bounce and and you can have that guy out of your peripheral vision, you got to body that ball up. And I watched, it was a younger age group, and I watched these guys, and they all blocked the ball perfectly. So they were all in a steady position, and they dropped down to block. And I'm like, why is it so difficult to win? And it's going to go into another thing that I started to think about a little bit more, the longer I've got into my coaching career. But why is it so difficult from when we're in a crouch position? And then it goes into when we play catch to start a game. Why is it that when we receive a ball standing up, it's super easy, super natural, and then for some gosh forsaken reason, we drop to the ground. We know the pitch. Yeah, it might be a little bit below us, or below our knees, or below the strike zone, so we might have to block it, but why all of a sudden do we get locked up and stiff and rigid, but yet when we stand up, it's easy to catch and throw. So it just got me thinking about that. So that was my first step of like, okay, so when we first start blocking, if I get like maybe a 13, 14-year-old kid, somebody that's about ready to go on to high school, and they're not just as good as a blocker in an actual traditional setup, one knee setup, whatever you want to say, we start with a stand-up block. And I was having guys, I said, probably shouldn't be telling you this because maybe, nobody got hurt, but I'd have them take their mask off. I'm like, you're going to be more focused on getting this ball into your belly where you're going to control it easier. I mean, obviously we should understand that the easiest spot to control a block is with our glove, but we're going to control it easier with our belly. But if we don't have our mask on, we're going to be more focused on trying to adjust our body there. So we started doing that. At one point in time, I'm like, when guys we go into blocking position, especially a young guy, a 9-year-old, 8-year-old, whatever, 10-year-old, they all want to glove everything. Well, that's fair. We understand that the catch is the first thing we want to do before we block it. So the block is the extension of the catch, right? But I started taking like volleyballs and soccer balls and footballs because you can't catch those with your glove, right? And so what we started to do was just throw it at them. Use your body. Use your body. Think soft. Think like you're going to bounce that basketball or a soccer ball or whatever it is. You're going to bounce it off the ground and let it come right back up. Like you're actually dribbling it with your chest or your body. That started to really, I guess, the light bulb started to really go off for a lot of these younger kids, and they started just to take away that fear. The one drill that I also like is putting that screen in front of them, and I would take a bungee cord, yellow bungee cord, and I'd put it to a certain height. And they were breaking balls, of course. Younger kids, obviously, it was like a fastball. Their fastball is always loop, right? But it was above the line, they stayed up. It was below the line, they dropped and blocked. I think it was just, and then again, it was increasing the repetitions over and over and over again. The more reps they got, the more comfortable they got. And it got such to a point that they just knew that it was like, all right, we would go through our entire mobility routine, and it was like, all right, guys, ready? And they're like all in a line, they're ready to go. And it was a drill that I saw that Craig Alvarez did with Kurt Casale, where it was all focused on, kind of centering the ball with your body, and he would roll a ball between the legs. And so we call it the 5-hole drill because nobody knows who Kurt Casale is. A 9-year-old doesn't know who Kurt Casale is. But so we start them in a line. They go right, and they let the ball go between their legs. They get up. So everybody goes through. They get up on the other side. Then they go left. Then they go right again. They go left. Then they don't use their hands. They use their body to block. We make them wear their masks. Parents sit in there and they watch. So I don't want to, hit somebody in the face. But that's just kind of the stuff that we've done in progression wise. We wouldn't necessarily say like, yeah, these are 100%. You got to do them every single day. No, but it's good because, again, it just goes back to that repetition. It's just like, it's supernatural. It's like you walking into your house and you know which way the doorknob turns.
For sure. I love that idea of I used to do a lot of standing blocks. I haven't done them in a while, and never really thought about the fact that they're a little bit. I always liked them because you had to like emphasize the idea of your hands leading you down there. Like if you don't like lead your hands to help you get down there, like you're literally not going to get down there. But the idea of just coming from a better, stronger, more balanced stance, again, like, and this is where we talk about a lot about blocking from the one knee, is like, it's not so much anything other than like, we're just starting in a better foundation to be able to do that. So I love that. And I love the soccer balls and the basketballs is great too. So how do you kind of progress from there? I mean, I think blocking is one of those things where it's like, number one, you just laid it out. You got to get comfortable getting hit by the ball. So now how do we get better at it? And how do you get better in terms of the read and react component is always the question. Oh yeah, he doesn't see it early enough, or, that sort of a deal.
Yeah, and I think it goes a lot into timing, right? And do they fully understand what timing is? No, probably not. Will they eventually? Yeah, hopefully. Um, and I think the next thing to it is I don't do any dry blocking drills. I just think it's pointless, right? I think they need to see an arm and they need to see a ball moving from somewhere. And obviously, we associate it as a task versus a drill. You have to complete this task in order to move on. It's kind of like black belt karate, whatever. We call it blocking karate. So you start at a whatever the lowest belt is. I think it's a yellow belt or something. So you start at yellow belt and you progress to black belt. Well, amongst that, it's we start to incorporate more arm action. And since we do this early enough, so if I look at it from an off season standpoint, we do heavy of our kind of our quote unquote absolutes that we must do on a regular basis early on. So October, November, December, we are just hammering them with our absolutes. So those stand up blocks, our Kasali blocks, our soccer ball blocks, and then we go into what we just call like a lob drill. It's a lob drill, and it's tossing it up in the air. And if it's in the air, all the catchers, they must get into a good enough, comfortable enough position where their glove can sit on the ground and it can hold on the ground. And we wait and we wait and we wait and we wait. And I tell them, and like I've gotten really good at buzzer sounds because I'll let them know. But we'll lob it. I'll send back probably about 30 feet, and they just have to wait. And then we start to progress the line down. Okay, now it goes from a lob to a little bit quicker pace. Now it comes down, it's a little bit quicker pace. And then we get to it to where I'm always asking the question to ensure that we are above the game speed, because I'm like, hey, is that too slow? Is that what about the velocity you're seeing? Yeah, that's about right. Okay, then I'm going to go a little bit harder. Okay, so I know. So we progress from there. We don't, and I'm not saying players are soft. We want bulldogs behind the plate. We want we want warriors back there. But we very rarely block baseballs. I found these certain baseballs. They're called strike balls. I shouldn't say we don't use baseballs. We use baseballs, but these are like 3-ounce baseballs. And so we're using that. We're using tennis balls. We're using softer. We use Zan's balls that he came out with this last year. So we're using a lot of those. Again, it's the same size as ball. Is it going to hurt a little bit? Yeah, probably. But again, I just don't want them to get deterred away from the progress that they've made. So that's why we're not using like hard balls. Early, I should say. Let me be clear. Early, we don't use those. As we get on to closer to their season, so when they break off for me in like late February, yeah, we'll start to pick up. We'll use baseballs, okay, and that's again just to kind of get them ready and prepared. So that's just again a general progression for those guys. The older guys, they're blocking. I crank the machine up. Stop the ball. You're trying to prevent a run. There's so many different facets of trying to prevent a run. Stop it. I don't care if the machine's pumping an 88-mile-an-hour slider. Learn how to do it. If you want to play at the highest level, whether that's your highest level, whether that's Division I college baseball, D2, major leagues, professional baseball, you're going to have a dude somewhere in that time frame that's going to throw you or spike off a 88-mile-an-hour slider. Better block it. Okay, or glove it. What are the two? So we're also doing a lot of that stuff. We do a pick block combo drill, and then we do a block catch combo drill. So we'll start off with this is with our older guys too. So they'll block it, and then they'll kind of pick it. So they're getting the same pitch over and over, and then we'll say, okay, that's set one. Set one's middle. Set two's outer third. Into a left-handed batter, and then set three is inside to a right-handed batter. So where they're shifting their body, so they're not staying complacent behind the plate, but it's it's block, and then it's pick, and then it's And again, too, we're using all of our stances just so we can understand how our body needs to move. We're making notes to say, okay, this guy's mobility sucks in his ankles and his knees need to get a little bit more juice in them. And then you got these, his hips or his IRs all over the place. So we're trying to make those notes. Then therefore the next day they're prepping themselves with a little bit of mobility routine. So as I said to you, it's a little bit long-winded answer, but yeah, that's kind of our progression with a lot of different styled athletes, I guess.
So when you add the pick in there, are you just training the idea of using the hands as well? It's kind of that we've always had that kind of. I love that this has come up because it's always had that old school thought of like, don't pick the ball, don't whatever. But again, results oriented. Are we
Yeah.
keeping the guy from moving up? So you are training them in the sense of picking a ball in a certain situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, Brett, and I'll probably get myself in trouble if anybody here in Omaha, Nebraska at the high school level hears this, but I tell all our guys, pick it. If you trust yourself and you're confident enough in picking the ball, pick it. Pick it. You watch enough baseball. If you watch enough baseball, I don't care if it's, and the guys here, if you go to a College World Series game, I mean, you know about that stuff. You know the type of talent in that level. And you go watch a minor league game in your town somewhere. Pick the ball. Why? And I think Swanee said this. The most secure spot for you to block a ball at is in your pocket of your glove, which is where you want to catch the ball at, right? How do you secure the ball the easiest? It's there. I think you were talking to Oliver about this. In 2021, Tomas Nido blocked the total of 35 pitches, deemable, 35 pitches, and only 5 of those hit his chest protector. 5. What does that tell you? Use your glove. Use your glove. Now, obviously, people look from it from a aesthetic standpoint. Oh man, it wasn't a good block. He didn't have his glove and his bare hand behind his glove in the 5-hole and his chin and chest down over the ball. That was a bad block. No, bullshit. It was based upon, did the runner advance or not? We're looking for the results, not the aesthetics of the block.
I think he's pretty eye-opening because we were talking to Colin Wilbur about this and the idea of like he also is going to back pick it immediately once he picks. And so it's the idea of like, again, when you are like controlling the run game is not always, how many guys did you throw out? It's don't give them opportunities. So now if every single time that ball's in the dirt and you pick it and you're looking to back pick, dude, that guy's going to be so close to the bag. He's not going to have that, aggressive secondary. Maybe you keep him one step closer that now the double in the gap, you got to play at the plate. I mean, these are all the things that we never think about because it's like we're always so concerned about, the statistic or what it looks like. Yeah. And it's like those are the things that are massive. And I think the one knee stance has helped a ton with that because,
no doubt,
again, that stronger connection to the ground, that lower center of gravity, it's easier to pick. That's why the infielder gets down and the first baseman really gets down below to pick a pitch or a throw from an infielder. So it's definitely in there, and it's just the idea of I think the back pick has been a very good sell for me to tell the younger guys when their high school coaches are saying, hey, you're picking too much. It's like, well, then back pick some dudes, and then all of a sudden he's going to be like, oh, okay, hang on a second. Maybe we're actually going to get some outs out of you picking the ball instead of just keeping the guy from moving 90 feet. That might be a benefit that we should be able to buy into, right?
No doubt. 100% agree. 100% agree. And I look at it, I tell our guys too, I mean, in a running situation with a runner at first base, depending upon, and this goes again to just your overall approach to whether that's game planning or what, right? The guys that are going to run. Let's say you got an average to below average guy. And the guy spikes a ball. Well, first off, let's go back by pitch profile. A fastball. What does every catcher expect? A fastball that's thrown is not going to be thrown. We don't call for 0-2 fastballs in the dirt. We just don't, right? Yeah, we call for a fastball. We call at the bottom of the zone, and it might be yanked so much because this pitcher might be falling off this side, whatever it might happen. But that ball's going to end up in the dirt. Or if it's a crucial part in the game and you're playing for outs, let's say you got a 4-run lead, why do you want to block the ball? Play for outs. Go get it. Show it off, especially at the high school level. Show it off. Show your athleticism. So I'm with you. I'm on that train where it's like, dude, pick it, throw it. Pick it, throw it. Pick it, throw it. Pick it, throw it. Whereas first, second, or third, throw it. You don't know unless you do it. You don't know what your capabilities are unless you try it.
You also don't know what the window is, right? I tell guys, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
once you start back picking, you go, man, like they don't have to be that far off. They just kind of have to turn their shoulders to the next base. And it's difficult for them to get back with as quick as I can get that thing to them. So it's just a great point. Like, just start doing it. And it's like, they're always like, oh, yeah, like I got to talk to my infielder. I'm like, no, you don't even need a freaking sign. Tell your infielders you're back picking all day freaking long, and they better be there and ready for it. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
do it 3 times a game. This is not something that needs to be like, hey, give him a sign or whatever. Like, yeah, we want him to know, but at the end of the day, like, he needs to know who you are and that you're going to be doing it all day long.
Absolutely.
So when you got you're talking about throwing in that aspect of the recovery piece.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think we don't talk about enough is, we do a ton of the blocking, and it's like, okay, what's next in terms of the play? Yeah. What are you talking to guys about in terms of that, just going to get the ball?
Yeah. So I did a camp down at, near Georgia Tech in Atlanta this last November, and was fortunate enough to meet Matt Wieters, which he was on staff there, and, I'm kind of in shock because I respected Matt, watched him play. This isn't his jersey, by the way, but he played at the College World Series with Georgia Tech when they were here and in Omaha, and was fascinated that this guy he's a monster. I mean, he's 6'6". He's probably taller in cleats and had a good understanding of it. And he's a bigger guy, and I was a bigger guy. And I look at it from the hardest versus and I don't think there's any easy in this game, but I look at it from a more of an efficiency standpoint. You got Matt Wieters, who's 6'6", and if he blocks a ball, and this, Matt grew up in kind of like the original traditional type setup era. If we're into a one knee type style era, I guess now, as it relates to catching. But I asked him that question, like, when you talk about throwing or coming out and recovering a ball, you're a big dude. How do you get there, and how do you get that ball out so clean, crisp, and quick? And he was like, I think about on a block situation, no matter where the ball's at in front of me, then I'm going to go right foot first. And I pondered it I'm still pondering it today, but I tried to put it in action. Okay, right foot first, right foot first. Are we always going to think right foot first when a ball hits off our body, or we don't cleanly pick it, or we paddle block it? Are we always going to think about get the ball first and our right foot to the ground? But it made sense as to why he said it, because when you come up, you're already ready into more or less a throwing position to throw. So if you're blocking that ball and that ball is to your, right to your right, let's say it's 8 feet to your right, and I come up and I step with my left foot with my right hand, I have to step with my right foot to get my body going to second base. So that was one thing that I started to take away. I've always said, and I believe this, and it might get some controversial kickback, but I always think the recovery is way more important than the block itself. When we do our drills, our blocking drills, like I said, I don't care how the guy does it. I care how quickly they can get to the ball. We do a drill as it relates to blocking. It's kind of our finisher. We put lines, it's kind of like tapes down. We have a little bit thinner turf, so the ball skids a little bit, but we try to see how soft we can be with our body because of where that ball's at, and guys win prizes and whatnot. But blocking the ball, if they get it into a certain spot, they have an ability to they get the most or whatever over time, they win a prize. But I've always just felt like the recovery is just more important than the block itself, just because there's, like I said, it goes back. There's no textbook on this stuff. There's no right way or wrong way. There's no one way to skin a cat. Rome wasn't built in one day. All roads lead to Rome, and all that stuff, right? So, as it relates, what do we tell our guys? Like, we start with that kind of right foot recovery, walk out of it. I'm not a big bear crawl guy with our guys. I say get the ball to your right hand. Like, same thing when we throw. Get the ball to your right hand. How do you do it? On a bunt play, we had training last night with our guys at a field, and we were talking about bunt plays and bunt recoveries. And as the ball's bunted, I've never seen. Well, I started going back into today because I just wanted to make sure that I was giving the right information, not to see if I was right or wrong, but to give the right information. But of all the bunt recoveries I picked up, I never saw guys go with two hands to the ball. It was always just bare hand, bare hand, bare hand, bare hand, bare hand. Now, if you had time, 100% they were going two hands. But the bang bang plays, which in like a block recovery, it's a bang bang play essentially. If you're trying to throw the guy out at second base, if he's going to take a chance to get to second, it was all ball to right hand and go, ball to right hand and go, ball to right hand and go. We'll do blocking drills and bunt drills with no gloves on. Like, guys, sorry, you're going to use your body, and once you get it up, you can only pick it up with your right hand. You're going to put your left hand behind your back, stuff like that, just so they're getting used to, like, all right, how do I become more efficient? The more efficient I am, the quicker I am. And once I become more efficient, more quicker, and the more repetitions I do it, the more consistent I become. And now I'm just a weapon. When that ball hits my body, I'm a weapon now. Be a hunter. I mean, we're using cues like that. Go get it. So that's kind of how we approach it.
I like that. Get it to the right hand. We do drills where like you can't touch the ball. Like you got to go recover it. It's got to stay between your feet and just stop. Like don't even touch it, because I always tell them like you need to be in a position where you might just scoop and throw, like not use your feet at all. And if you go reach, to go get that thing, all your momentum's falling forward and difficult. But I like that. Even just the thought of like, now I'm thinking like you can pick it up, but it's only if it's in the right half of your body, because that's the only time that you're going to be able to actually pick this thing up and throw it. No doubt. But yeah, the scoop thing is just, and it makes sense. In the day, it was more the idea of like if the ball is moving, like a bunt is still moving, like, yeah, we need a little bit of adjustability, but like it's not moving a lot. And if we're blocking well, it should be sitting there a little bit easier for us.
Well, and I look at it from like a third baseman standpoint when they had to field a slow roller coming in, or a shortstop, or whoever it may be. That ball's not stopping. They're not scooping it with two hands. They're thinking in their head that everybody on the field should have an internal clock, right? And how much time do I have? That guy at the plate, if it's their 7-hole hitter and he's their first baseman, okay, he's probably not getting out of the box that fast or that quick. And he's right on the right side. Let's say he's on the right side and he does a swinging bunt or something like that. You might have time, but now we got the leadoff guy and he's, sub 4 to first base and he's on the left side. We don't have the time to get our feet nice and easy, and everybody always wants good throws. In our facility, I said, spray the wall. Let's spray it. Fail here. So when it's in the game, you're on cruise control. You're riding down the California coast in a Tesla, and you're just sitting back enjoying the scenery. That's how we have to train, and that's what I tell our guys. Like, it's okay to fail here. Throw the ball through a window. I don't care. But I want your body to feel exactly what it should feel like. We just then now have to go back and, okay, reverse engineer this thing. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? What did it feel like? What didn't it feel like? Do you feel like you can make this move again? Okay, now let's change the body posture. So it's a lot of backwards engineering to this to ensure that, okay, this guy is comfortable with what we're asking him to do. We're trying to get him to understand and or do. And then, again, I think when we first started talking, we were talking about, Jerry Weinstein and stuff. Like, you got to be a shortstop with catcher's gear on. You got to learn how to throw from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And, you got one of the best guys in the world right now to watch in your area, and Pat Bailey. The guy's a freak. And I look at it this way. I mean, Norin Arenado could probably be one of the best catchers in the game if he decided that he's like, I don't want to play third base anymore. I want to go win 10 gold gloves behind the plate. Probably could do so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm intrigued on your interaction with Wieters, because Wieters was really, like, it's funny because I haven't heard the name in a long time. And he's kind of a guy that, like, even in his career, I felt was like an under the radar, really good player, both defensively and offensively. But he also kind of was a little groundbreaking in that he was a 6'6" catcher. And
Right.
you look at now, you have like, Jacob Stallings is 6'5", and like, the two guys that started in the All-Star game this year, Murphy and Heim, are 6'3" and 6'4", and they kind of paved the way. He kind of paved the way a little bit for these guys to at least have an example when, their dumbass coach in Little League or high school says, "Oh, you're growing out of the position. We got to move you." So it's the idea of, like, he was a pretty groundbreaking in that sense. Is there any other tidbits he gave you that you could share?
Nah, it was more or less we were talking about. We got into just generalizations about just catching, what his thoughts were on one knee catching. He thought it saved his career, and he was pretty fortunate with it. He still was, and a lot of those guys that were kind of on the tail end of their career. I think the only guy that really embraced it was like a Tyler Flowers, and that really propelled his career to above and beyond. But I think they were still kind of like, okay, what are the mechanics of this whole thing? And, maybe at the time, Baltimore didn't have a guy to really understand and teach it to him. Or where he was at Washington. I know Washington didn't have a guy, for sure. I know Washington didn't have a guy. But, he found like it was the right thing to do. And for him at that time, and didn't really understand. And maybe that was just kind of like where it was starting to get to, okay, what does the analytics mean and everything? Can I steal a strike here based upon how I'm set up? And I think we were just so at a very young stage in understanding why and how and what benefits was it going to provide for me? Is this just a trend, a fun and trendy type thing? Or was this going to be something that's going to eventually, improve guys' overall just game, or is it going to propel their careers even longer? So, but he was a big fan of it. He said he just didn't wish he had more time with it to understand it. But yeah, deep down, just a very good dude. Some of those guys you just don't know where they're at in their lives, but the fact that he wanted to go back to his alma mater and be a coach, a volunteer coach, I think Troy Tulowitzki, he didn't go back to Long Beach, but he went to Texas, and Houston Street, I think at one point in time was helping out at University of Texas. Just to have those guys around there, I think it's really cool for those athletes to experience.
For sure. Hey, if I sent you a Cal hat, can we replace that Stanford one back there?
So yeah, absolutely. So my really good buddy, Thomas Eager, he's the pitching coach there, and Thomas actually didn't play at Stanford. So when they came to the World Series, I asked my son, I said, who do you want to cheer for? And I lined up all the hats at this one tent, and he said, I want to root for Stanford. I don't know why. I mean, it's kind of a ugly logo, but yeah, definitely, I'll take that. I think I have another player that I trained, San Diego hat, and University of San Diego.
I have become a Stanford baseball fan just because Thomas and Coach Esker were at Cal before, so yes, I played for Coach Esker, so obviously I'm partial to him. But it's still it is ugly with a stupid tree. But anyway, my last question, as always, we're big into food over here. Yes. So if you've listened to the podcast, but I need your best food recommendation. It can be anywhere, but okay. Being that you are in Omaha and being that is a hub for baseball, college baseball, give us your best place to eat in the city of Omaha.
That's a tough one because there's quite a bit, and this town embraces people. We had when I was running my podcast, we had your good friend Tony Arnrich on. And we were talking about it. I would say for incoming or out-of-town fans here to Omaha, Nebraska, the Drover is probably number one. It's an experience in itself. It's kind of like this rusty old, you know, I should say rusty. It's kind of like the crusty old, vet type place. But no, it's a steakhouse and it's phenomenal. Can't go wrong with it. The Drover's probably pretty decent. I mean, if you come to Nebraska, you gotta have a steak, is what I'll say. But I go with the Drover. We got a lot of good restaurants downtown near the College World Series in our old market area. Just in the old market in general, there's a good place called Stokes. It's kind of a Tex-Mex type place. I really like it. M's Pub is a staple here in Nebraska. So about 3 years ago, right around COVID, is the building burnt down. And it was like, we're talking about our old market area. It's old brick cobblestone road. Really neat area. Just the whole building just burned down. So they rebuilt it. So that's kind of a staple. M's Pub. They have these, oh gosh, they're kind of like flatbread type things. I can't remember exactly what they're called. But I would say between the Drover and M's Pub is where you got to hit up.
Sounds good. I'm going to do it next time I'm down there with you.
Yeah,
hit
absolutely.
Up the Drover.
We need to get you back here.
Let's do it. Hey, man, I appreciate you coming on, dude, taking the time. It's so much great information, and I look forward to chatting with you down the line.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brett. Appreciate everything you do.
If you enjoyed that, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll have a new episode for you every single Tuesday here on our YouTube channel and wherever you listen to podcasts.